Hello and welcome. So, today I have a very special treat for you guys. Instead of giving you guys one of my infamous 5-minute messages, which was a recap of something I may have talked about during church, a sermon, or a recap on a message I heard at church with my own little twist on it, I decided, because it's Christmas, to dive in a little bit more about some of the characters that we find from the verses that we normally talk about during the Sunday before Christmas. Now, typically in a lot of churches, Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 going into chapter 2 is what we basically base the message and sermon from. So today, we're going to dive into characters, not Mary and Joseph, but we're going to dive into chapter 2. So that pretty much starts with King Herod. Now, to save you guys some time, one of the things I do, because I'm a lovable nerd and a geek, is I basically went through a whole bunch of different theological studies, Bibles, different versions of the Bibles to get you this information. I just happened to pick one of my favorite Bibles to read from today. And so basically, I'm going to read from this Bible. A lot of people that have been around me know about this Bible. It has been my pretty much something I always used to carry with me. So, chapter 2 in Matthew. Jesus was born in the town of Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. Now, Judea was one of the 4 different parts of the kingdom of Israel. King Herod. Growing up, we hear a lot of, I remember a lot of stories that King Herod was a crazy man. He was a mad ruler. There's a reason why he might have been so angry, so vicious when it came to Jesus. And that is because King Herod was not exactly, didn't have the lineage. A lot of your rulers in that time period, especially in Israel, you had to be able to trace back your lineage. All right. I am related to King Solomon, King David this way. King Herod didn't have that. He was a very shrewd diplomat, and he just kind of got into the role of king. So he had always been afraid that somebody would come by and say, hey, my lineage is true. I deserve to be king. And he would lose his power. So, about that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, where's the newborn king of Jews? Now, again, this basically sets off a lot of things. King Herod was one of them. And, of course, some of his court was as well. We had seen his star as it arose, and we have come to worship him. Herod was deeply disturbed by their question, as was all of Jerusalem. He had called a meeting with his leading priests and teachers of religious law. Where did the prophets say the Messiah would be born? In Bethlehem, they said, for this is what the prophet wrote. O Bethlehem of Judea, you are not just a lowly village in Judea, for a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd for my people of Israel. Now, I kind of skipped over who the wise men were. The wise men in a lot of theological studies were what they considered to be magi. Magi are a fancy word for, Persian word for astrologers, basically people who do a lot of study on planetaries and all that stuff, and they do a lot of research. So these are pretty smart individuals. And basically, a lot of the old theologians and all that stuff believe that these guys came from a little place right outside of Babylon called Partha, P-A-R-T-H-A, Partha. So basically, they were employed in the courts of the Persian kings. So they were, they had money, and they had basically again, they were studying stuff and they heard about the star appearing. And of course, the legend that the King of Jews would be born under a star like this. So that's what they believed. Then Herod sent a private message to the wise men, asking them to come see him. At this meeting, he learned the exact time that they first saw the star. He then told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship them too." Now, here's a funny thing about how close Bethlehem was to Jerusalem. Again, Jerusalem was the capital. And that's where King Herod was. It's basically 5 miles from Jerusalem. Now, again, back then, it would probably take them a little bit of time to get 5 miles, but it was really close. And probably a day's worth of drive, on horseback or camelback, you probably could get to Bethlehem. But again, Bethlehem was a decent sized town at that time. So after this interview, the wise men went their way. Once again, the star appeared to them, guiding them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house where the child and his mother, Mary, were, and they fell down before him and worshipped him. Now, I just said house. So, again, it took a while for these magi, these wise men, to get from where they were at to Bethlehem or to Jerusalem, and then from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. So some books that I read basically believe that Jesus was around 1 or 2. Some say, he was about a couple months old at the time, but there was some time from when he was born in that manger. And basically, Joseph and Mary were in a house at this time. Again, you really didn't want to travel right away after having a kid. You want to basically heal. You want your body to get ready. You want the kid to grow up a little bit so they can become sturdy before you go to any distance. And of course, Joseph and Mary were from Nazareth. So it was a little bit of a distance. So they were living in Bethlehem at the time, close by. So that way the kid, Jesus, would have a chance to grow up and become healthy. Then they opened their treasure chest and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. This is where a lot of people come to believe that they were known as the 3 kings. Because when you hear of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, those were not exactly the most cheapest gifts in the world, especially at that time. So a lot of theologians believe that basically these 3 gifts represented stuff. The gold basically represented, which I don't know where my gold went, here they are, basically represented, the wealth of a king, right? Kings, basically, they had gold around. So this is stuff that they could buy stuff. They were rich because they had gold. Frankincense. Frankincense is actually a sapling. It's a resin from a tree. And basically, frankincense usually, like when it gets raw and they break it off, it's like little rocks and stuff like that. But frankincense has been known to be put into balms like this. This is not frankincense. It's a very strong smelling stuff that comes from a resin. And basically, again, can be put in balm, can be made into an oil if you melt it and all that stuff. It is also very soothing, right? So not only does it smell great, just like my mustache was, it actually is a very soothing and healing balm. Now, the other thing was myrrh. Myrrh is a spice that basically a lot of theologians recognize as a spice that they use, unfortunately, during death. Basically, myrrh, again, is a spice, or you could find it in oil where they basically would apply it to the dead so that way they're not smelly, right? When people die, they kind of stink. Now, I've been around this world for 49 years, and I'm not going to lie to you. For a majority of those 49 years, I believe that. I believe that they were basically rich people, gifts given to this little baby boy. And it's like, okay, well, what did, Mary and Joseph use it for? And then I stumbled across this one interpretation of it. So during this time period, Jerusalem was a place where it was a large hub, right? You had all these people traveling through. They would stop at Jerusalem. They would get their wares. They would sell their stuff. They would basically replenish their supplies and move on. Again, I told you guys earlier, Magi were very smart people, and they were going on a trip, right? They saw the stars like, oh, hey, we don't want to miss it. Just like around here, when the Northern Lights happen, you will find people skipping their favorite TV show to go watch it. So they went on this journey. And the items that I talked about, frankincense, gold, and myrrh, can be found in Jerusalem at that time period. Again, it wasn't the cheapest stuff in the world, but it was some good stuff. And gold could be used to buy things, right? So it's a perfect gift for a young mother who's got a young kid, be able to buy things. Just like nowadays, whenever there's a baby shower, you're going to see people buy gift cards to certain things or gift certificates because they don't want to, they want to make sure that the mother could buy what they want for the kid, right? If you're setting up your room as My Little Ponies, you want My Little Ponies. You don't want Bluesy. So frankincense, again, I told you, was a balm. Nowadays, when a kid is born, usually you'll find somebody buying diaper rash or buying some balm or lotion for dry hands, especially, you don't ever want to handle a kid with your dry, cracked hands. So there's your frankincense comes in. Myrrh. Let's face it, if you've been around newborns and stuff like that, they're messy. The stuff that comes out of them doesn't smell good either way. So sometimes it's smelly, right? You don't have baby powder. You don't have air fresheners back in the day. You had to mask those scents every once in a while. So that's where the myrrh might have came into. But regardless, these 3 wise men who were not Jewish, they were just scientists who were trying to figure out and trying to see whether or not this legend could be true. And it was. They put thought in these gifts because they knew that they could be applied. So they were thinking with this instead of just this. Of course, the story ends where the Magi, instead of going back through Jerusalem and saying, oh, hey, Herod, yeah, you're right, he is in Jerusalem. They're like, let's skip Herod. God's telling us we have this feeling that we need to go the long way, right? Let's check something else out on our way back to Persia. So they were thinking with their hearts. And that's where I believe the story with the wise men truly belongs. When you give gifts, wholeheartedly thinking about how it basically would improve the lives of others, you're doing the work of God. So as we go through this holiday season, may you spread joy. May you give the gifts to those that will, in the future, pay it forward. May God bless you. Until next time, thank you so much.